Hello everyone, welcome you all back to our YouTube channel Science is Life. In today's video, we hope to discuss functions, how to use functions in C programming. So let's get started. Actually, functions play a major role in programming because a program is a collection of functions. Now let's see what are these functions. When we use functions, it avoids rewriting same logic or code again and again, right? That means we can use a particular function again and again. So we can write separate operations within a function, and we can use this function again and again. That is why it is mentioned here as reusability. Then we can divide our program into small modules, right? According to the functionalities or according to the operations, we can divide our program into small modules. And the third benefit, the major benefit, is that in case of errors in a function, we only need to debug that particular function instead of debugging the entire program, right? We don't need to check the whole program and we don't need to change the whole program. Just we can go into the particular function, and we can edit it as it don't make any error, right? So these are the advantages of using functions. There are two types of functions: library functions and user-defined functions. Library functions are predefined functions. Those functions are predefined and stored in, implemented in the C program, right? They are already implemented in C program. So we can use these functions by calling. In the previous video we discussed predefined string functions. Then we learned that printf, scanf, gets, puts are predefined functions, right? So those are library functions. And the second one is user defined functions. User defined means those functions made by us, right? As our requirements we make functions. These are user defined functions. Then when we write a function, there are three types of aspects in a function, right? First one is function declaration or prototype, right? So we'll see what is this prototype. Then the second one is function calling. When we need to execute our function, we need to call that function within the main function. That is calling function calling, right? The third one is function definition. Let's see each by. Right. So here I have mentioned how function prototype or function declaration is done. So there are two methods actually. This is the first method. First of all, we need to mention our return type of our function, right? If we are going to return an integer, then we need to mention int, right? If we are going to return float, then we should mention float. Likewise, here at the very beginning, we need to mention what is the return type of our function. That means we can return something by using a function, right? We can return something by using a function, so we need to mention what is the return type. If you are not going to return anything, then you can mention void here, right? Then we need to mention the name of our function. This function name should be a very meaningful one, then we can easily identify, right? So use a meaningful function name. After that, we open and close brackets, within these brackets we need to mention the argument list. So there may be one parameter or two parameter or any number of parameters, or there may be no parameter, right? This bracket will be blank, or as your requirements it will be changed, right? So if you use parameter, then we need to mention the data type of that parameter, right? You will learn why we use these parameters, right? This is the first method, and the second method is also same as before. We need to mention the return type and the function name within the brackets. In the previous method we just mentioned the data type only. If not, we can declare it as a variable, right? We can declare it as a variable also, right? So in both of these methods, after that we need to put semicolon, right? So where do we mention these function prototypes? We mention these function prototypes at the very beginning, and after we mention the header files, right? After the header files we need to mention what are the function prototypes that we are going to use in future, right? Then this is function definition. Function definition means that is the implementation of our function, right? So the thing that what is the functionality of our function is we are assigning in here, right? We tell that what we are going to do using this function, right? So here also we need to mention the return type again and the function name, and we should open brackets. Within these brackets we need to mention variables, right? Here we need to mention variables, or if it is an array then we should mention array, right? I'll do a separate video for arrays. If you don't know, I'll do, right? So here I have declared two separate variables. The both are integers here, right? If you want, you can make it float, string, or anything as you wish, right? So this is the argument list, and after the argument list we open curly brackets, right? When we open these curly brackets and close these curly brackets, that means this is the structure of this block structure of this function, right? In another words, function body of this function, right? So all the things we mention within this open and closed curly brackets, right? Everything we need to mention within these curly brackets. So this is the function body. The difference between function prototype and function body is in function prototype we end it by a semicolon, but in the function definition we do not end by a semicolon. We after the argument list we open curly brackets and we do the codes and we end the curly brackets, right? So let's see how to call a function, right? So it is really easy. We need to mention the function name. We are not going to mention the return type, right? That is the difference. We beginning mention in the function name, then we open brackets and we put some values or variables compatible with our function prototypes data types, right? So if we mention two integers, then I can put two integers here, right? It may be a value or a variable, right? So but here my 5 is integer, my variable also integer variable, right? So after calling we close the bracket, then we end it by a semicolon, right? So here I have written a very simple C program to understand how the functions are working, right? So here I have mentioned a very simple uh, function prototype and function call and function definition, right? So where do I mention function prototype? After the header files I mention function prototypes, right? Why I mention these function prototypes? That I am going to say to the compiler that I hope to have a function like this. I hope to have a function named function name, and I hope to have two integers into this function, right? That is why I mentioned the parameters. Then after using these two integers, I will do some operation within this function, and after that I hope to return something integer value, right? Some integer value. That is the meaning of this function prototype, right? Then how this code will execute? Compiler will comes to the header files first, then it will comes to the function prototype, and if there are any other global variables or something, then it will execute these things as well. Then after that it will comes to the main function, right? The compiler compiles uh, first main function, right? Rather than other functions, compiler compiles main function first. So that is why we mention that is why we call other functions within this main function, right? Because compiler comes to the main function, so within the main function we can call other functions as well, right? So if there are any calls in the main function will execute, then if there is a function calling like here, then it will call this function. So how to call this function? We need to mention the name, right? So I am going to call the function by putting two integers. Why I put two integers? Because I hope in the prototype I hope to have two integers, right? So that is why I put two integers into this function. So I am giving 5 and 10. So when I call this function, my function will be invoked by 5 and 10. So the integer a will catch this 5 and integer b will catch this 10, right? 5 is assigned to a and 10 is assigned to b. Then there may be several statements for some operations. After that there may be an integer value to return, right? So if I return that integer value, then it will it will comes to here. I will explain by a code, right? Then that value will be come to here, the returning value. Then it will be assigned into this integer a variable, right? So that is so how it is going. Compiler will execute each and every codes before main function, then main function it will reach to the main function, then within that main function if there are any statements it will execute, and if there is a function call then it moves into that function and execute the things within that function. Then again it comes to the end of that statement, right? After executing this statement it will comes to the end of that statement, after that statement, right? So then it will again execute each and everything within this main function, right? That is how the function calling is working, right? So let's see how this is happening by a practical. So here I have written a very simple C program to add two integers by using function, right? So when I use function, first of all what I need to do, I need to mention what is the prototype of my function, right? So after the header file, I am going to mention my prototype. So my function name is, I hope to have my function name addition, right? Then I hope to have two integers into this function. So here I am mentioning int num1, int num2, or you can mention it like this, int, two ints only, right? The two methods are correct, so you can use a single method as you wish. Then I hope to return something from this function. So I hope to return an integer. So my return type also integer, right? So this is the function prototype. Then let's move into the main function. In the main function, I am creating two integer variables. Integer variable 1, I am assigning 5 into this variable, and I am going to assign 10 into my integer variable 2, right? Then I hope to have, I am creating integer result variable also. Then I hope to have the value of this result as the summation of these two values, right? So I hope to have it like this, where I hope to have it like this, right? I can directly do it like this, right? But I hope to do this by using function. So I am calling this function, so I need to push these two values into this function, right? So I am putting variable 1 and variable 2 into this function. Then what will happen when I call this function? Then compiler will goes to invoke this function, right? Then there I am creating the two variables, int num1 and num2. I declare two variables. So my functions, these two variables, are expecting two values for each variable, right? My declared variables are expecting to have two values. So that is why I put two values into this bracket, right? Then if I put variable 1, that means I am putting 5, right? So my num1 variable will catch value 5, right? My num2 variable will catch value 10, right? Then in this function I am declaring another variable, integer variable sum, right? So I hope to have I hope to assign the addition of this num1 and num2's value, right? So after that I need to return this sum, value of this sum. So I am returning this sum, right? So what is the return type of my function? It is integer. What is the returning value of my function? It is sum, and the data type of my sum is also integer. So returning value and returning type are compatible, right? So there will be no error, right? So after executing this function, what will happen? This function is now returning sum. That means summation of 5 and 10, right? So it will looks like this. After returning, it will looks like this, right? 10 will be assigned into the variable result, right? Because our function is returning 10, so 10 will be assigned into this function, right? So then after executing this statement, there is another statement in the main function. It is printf. There is a printing something here, so I need to print output, and I need to print the result of my value. So it will print output 10, sorry 15, right? It will print output 15. You can see it, right? So that is how function is used in C programming. So I hope you all have an idea about how the functions are working in programs. So use these functions in your programs as well. So let's meet with another video. So thank you all.